The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. Jason Mudd here from Axia Public Relations. Welcome. We're glad you're with us this afternoon. You're in for a special treat. Just real quick, an audio announcement. Please select your audio now if you haven't done so. There are instructions on your screen. Welcome to Lunch with the Producer, featuring Nikki Woods, senior producer with the Joyner Morning Show. We're so pleased you're with us today.
I'm glad to be here. I didn't know if you were talking to me or the audience. Hi, Jason.
Hey, Nikki.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yes,
how are you?
I'm great. I'm doing well. It's really glad to have you here, and thank you for your participation and support. We are excited about all the attendees we have with us today and them connecting with us for learning more about the Tom Joyner Morning Show.
Well, I am super excited to be here to talk about it.
Excellent. Well, I just want to let everybody know that we are tweeting questions with hashtag #MeetTheProducer. And just to make sure we do see those questions, make sure you tag @Axia PR. All right, so let's see. We'll go ahead and get started, and let me just do a couple of housekeeping items here. So we are recording this webinar for promotional purposes, and all rights are reserved. This presentation is copywritten by Axia Public Relations. Now that that's out of the way, just a quick message. Axia Public Relations is pleased to sponsor this event. And we are a public relations firm building strong brands and great reputations for clients nationally. We do this through media relations, media management, reputation management, crisis PR management, as well as social media strategy and management, blogging, thought leadership, speaking programs, awards, and recognition programs. Our special guest today is Nikki Woods, senior producer of the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And she is responsible for engaging on-air content heard each morning, reaching 8 million listeners on more than 100 affiliate radio stations across the United States. She has worked in various markets, including Boston, Chicago, Dallas, and St. Louis. She's well educated at Howard University in DC, studying education there, as well as studying journalism at the University of St. Francis in Illinois. And Nikki, thank you for being here this morning. We wanted to tell you a little bit more about, or wanted to tell our audience today on our webinar a little bit more about the Tom Joyner Morning Show. So I will turn that over to you, and we'll keep the dialogue going together.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Like I said, I'm really excited to be here. This is one of my favorite things to talk about. So it's always good to talk to people who are as equally passionate about what they do as I am. As Jason said, the Tom Joyner Morning Show, we are in more than 100 affiliate cities. I think we're up to 122 now. We have 8 million listeners. We've been on the air since about 1994. I'm not sure if those who are familiar with Tom and how he got started, but he's been in radio a very long time. I jokingly, well, it's not a joke, but I tell people laughingly, I guess, and Tom doesn't like it when I do, but he's been in radio longer than I've been alive. So he really is a legend in this business. His nickname is the Fly Jock, and he got that nickname because he did something that I don't know of anyone else doing. He started doing mornings in Chicago, and he did afternoons in Dallas. So he would fly back and forth every day between the two cities, and he did that for 8 years. He racked up more than 8 million miles. So obviously this is a man who is dedicated to radio, and that was sort of the beginning of his syndicated days. And so, like I said, now we're up to more than 100 affiliate cities. We are a music formatted show, so we do play a lot of music, but Tom has coined the phrase putting the purpose in the party. So while he's equally passionate about his music, he's also equally passionate about the purpose. and that means education, information, community service, and a lot of grassroots causes and movements and organizations that he likes to either be involved in or touch indirectly. So like I said, even though we're mostly a music formatted show, I think that we do have some uniqueness in how much information we do provide that may not be related to music. So that's just a little bit about us and what we do on a daily basis.
Excellent. Thank you, Nikki. Thanks for sharing that. As I mentioned to you in our previous conversations, I've been real impressed with the amount of music that is played during the program, and at the same time, though, very informative and educational. So it's really got a nice formula that you guys have figured out.
Yeah, it is a fine balance. It is fine. We do a lot in 4 hours, so we're really, really proud of being able to present both sides of the coin, if you will.
Terrific. And so as we talked about, kind of outline for our webinar participants today, what is your unique media position in the Tom Joyner Morning Show? How does it differentiate from other programming and other media outlets?
Well, like I said, I think a little bit earlier, I think the one thing that makes us really special is how involved we are in the community. One of the things that Tom talks a lot about, and as a student of radio, I've learned a lot about, is, how integral radio was, especially among the African American community, for so long when it, comes to like civil rights and just passing along information and education and different things that people need to know about just through the intimate medium of radio. And Tom continues to do that. We, have always been on the ground when it comes to not only big events in the African American community, but big events, I think, just as, that are a part of the human experience that we've had recently. Katrina, we went down there right away when that happened, and we were on the ground. When the earthquakes happened in Haiti, Tom wanted it happened on a Thursday. I believe it was a Thursday night, and Tom was gassing up the plane, ready to go. And unfortunately, we couldn't get in because it was hazardous. But he is always ready to be there to try to help when he can. The Trayvon Martin, 9/11. All of those we immediately took action, and sometimes we stopped the music so that we can provide information that people need to have in order to either prevent something perhaps from happening or rectify a situation. So I think that's what makes us really unique. We're not just a music station. As I said, we put a lot of purpose in the party.
That's great. That's great. And Tom definitely has a great reputation for that. Tell us a little bit more about your audience share and demographics of the radio show and the radio network.
Absolutely. We have 8 million listeners that we talk to daily. Most of those listeners, as I said, Tom has been in the business a long time, and for most people who have listened to Tom, they're really, really passionate about him and the show. So most of our listeners have been with us a long time. So our listener profile probably tends to be the African American female between the age of 40 and 60. But we do try to tweak that a little bit younger. So I would say daily we try to target a younger demographic, 30 to 54. One of the challenges you have when you're working with a legend in the business is you have to continuously, grow a new audience, and you have to grow a younger audience. And so that has been an ongoing effort for us at the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And we do that through a variety of ways. We do that by surrounding Tom and Sybil and Jay, which is our main cast, with younger contributors or contributors that may have a younger demographic. We also do that through content, and we do that through music. So that is, that's our listenership. But I always describe our target or our listener profile as kind of like a bullseye. And you're throwing a paintball at it. Obviously you want to hit the bullseye, but when you do hit it with a paintball, there's some splatter. So we reach a lot of different people. It's not, that our only listener is African American. We have listeners from all, male and female. We also have different ethnic groups and races. unusual show and one that a lot of different people can be passionate about. Tom also has a website that works very closely with the show. I mean, it really is a partner when it comes to the content that we produce on the show. And that is, we are able to reach a new audience of people with our website and indeed bring in some younger viewers and listeners and that sort of thing. And we get about 1 million views on the website per week. So it's a pretty big machine as well.
Terrific, terrific. Real quick to the participants of our webinar, we're going to launch a quick poll, and we're just going to ask you, where are you located? And we're just trying to figure out who our audience is here today and make the presentation a little bit interactive, as well as being able to customize the presentation to your interest here. So take a moment and vote. I see about half of you voted so far, and we'll just give the other half a couple more seconds to continue to vote. Okay, most of our participants today are on the Eastern time, and then we've got some in Central and some in Pacific. So thank you for sharing that information with us. I'm going to go ahead and close the poll and share the results with you guys as well.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So we're reaching coast to coast here today on the Meet the Producer webinar. That's excellent. Okay, so moving on, let's take a look and talk about the ongoing topics of the Tom Joyner Morning Show, Nikki.
Well, we cover just about the gamut. I mean, we definitely, are an entertainment-based radio show. So when it comes to music and movies and television shows and all things entertainment, that's definitely something that we focus on. But like I said, we put a lot of purpose in the party as well. So, news events, whether they be local or national news, we are right there to cover it. Sports, we talk a lot about sports. Tom is a big sports junkie. We try to be really careful, since we do have a majority of female listeners, to make sure that those sports stories are relatable to females as well, for those who are not as passionate. Sybil Wilkes, who is our female co-host, I mean, she probably knows more sports than most men. I mean, she really, really loves her sports. So she helps us translate it for females a lot of the time. So it's really, really fun. But probably some of our most popular features and segments and interviews and discussions center around lifestyle issues. So health, we do a segment called Get Well Wednesdays, where we have a doctor on and we just talk about a different health issue each week. Relationships are huge. I mean, I don't think anybody ever gets tired about, talking about relationships. And then financial news. We do a segment on Mondays called Money Mondays with Melody Hobson that is extremely popular. So lifestyle issues always do really, really well on our show as well.
Terrific. All right, well, let's talk a little bit about and you've done some of this already, so excellent job. But the show direction and content, just kind of give us an overview of maybe some of the segments and opportunities that you haven't mentioned yet, as well as any kind of directional changes or enhancements you guys are looking to make in the near future.
Absolutely. I mean, I think there are a lot of opportunities for interviews, for discussion, for segment content on our show, because like I said, we do a lot more of that than most, if not all, music formatted shows. So we have contributors that are on the show that conduct interviews, like Roland Martin, who covers a lot of our more educational, political, hard-hitting news segments. He used to be on CNN as a contributor, as well as Jackie Reed, who she focuses more on issues. We call her segment Inside Her Story. So that focuses more on female topics and issues and discussions and topics that might be more suited for women. We also have other contributors, like I mentioned, Melody Hobson, We also have the Get Well Wednesday, where we utilize a different doctor every week. So if we have a medical expert, represented out there, we're always looking for those. Don Lemon, who is currently with CNN, is one of our contributors, as well as Reverend Al Sharpton, who covers a lot of the grassroots community type topics and also political types of discussions. So we're always looking for experts, not necessarily within those segments, but on the show to speak to some of the larger, news stories that may need to be discussed. But then we also do just regular interviews. So we're always looking for the celebrity interviews. We're always looking for experts there and people that can really lend value to our audience. I mean, that's the bottom line for us, I guess, is what kind of value do each of these interviews, each of these discussions, each of these segments bring. So we are always looking for somebody who can just bring a ton of value to our listening audience.
Terrific.
But then there's also opportunities, and I'm sorry, Jason, but there's also opportunities on the website that may not necessarily be on air. Like I said earlier, our website gets about 1 million views per week, so interviews there do really well, and we do a lot of video interviews for our website, as well as written articles, and blogs are a big deal on our site too. So there's a lot of opportunity there to place interviews that might not necessarily make it on air.
Okay. Great. Now let's talk about how do our audience best connect to the Tom Joyner Morning Show. But before we do that, let me remind everybody that they can tweet us their questions using hashtag #MeetTheProducer, as well as @AxiaPR on Twitter. And we would really like to hear from you guys. I know Nikki's very willing and very generous with her time to answer any questions you may have.
Absolutely.
So, Nikki, here's a list of some of the show contacts, and maybe you would talk through this a little bit for us.
Sure. Karen Powers is our talent coordinator and guest booking. She oversees all of that. So normally she is the one who will reach out to celebrities, reach out to music or artists, and coordinate that as well. But that's not limited to, but that normally is her scope. So she usually is the one that places the interview within the show. So she's a great person to have. And then as far as the people that I book, I'm normally, like with Maya Angelou dying this morning, I'm looking for people who can talk and speak to that for tomorrow's show. So I usually do like the late breaking news. I also place a lot of the interviews within our segments, like with Roland Martin and Jackie Reed. So I focus less on celebrity and more on the experts needed to talk about different topics in the show. Jasmine Pendleton is the managing director of BlackAmericaWeb.com, which is our website that accompanies the show. And then Julia Atherton, she is the VP of Sales for Reach Media, which is the company that owns the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And she focuses on the advertising, the sponsorships, the endorsements for both the radio show and BlackAmericaWeb.com.
Terrific. Thank you for that explanation. That's very helpful. People always want to know, who should I contact and how do you prefer to be pitched? Let's talk about that on the next slide.
Okay. Well, I guess the first thing that does go back to who you contact. I guess first, one of my do's and one of my don'ts is to always know who you're pitching. So there are, like I said, different people to pitch for different shows. So I think with our show being so big, it's not necessarily, like if you pitch me instead of Karen, I don't get offended. Just like if you pitch me, she wouldn't get offended. I mean, we would just make sure you landed in the right spot. At least I know you're talking to the current group of people. I still get pitches for the producer that was there 7 years ago. Now that to me is a little offensive because it just shows me you haven't done the work. I think even just Googling, producer Tom Joyner Morning Show, my name is going to pop up. So it's pretty easy to find out who the current producer is. Like I said, I mean, we're a big company. We have a big staff, so I don't always expect, people to know if it's a celebrity pitch. Karen may be better, or if it's an expert pitch, I may be better. You know, within, or if it, you know, if it's something that might work better for BAW, if you send it to me, it's not a big deal. We absolutely make sure that it lands in the right place. But you should know who the current people are that you should pitch. And I think that pretty much goes with any organization. You just want to make sure that you're reaching the right person. You know, and I always say that you should go for the personalized, especially when you get to the major shows. I totally get that most, you know, people have a set list that they send to and, you know, for their local stations. And I always think personalized goes a lot further than a generic letter. But I think that when you're asking to access or be given access to my 8 million listeners, that you should know my name. So that's just me. So I always suggest that people put a personal touch. It may take a little bit more time, but I think that it's worth it in the end. Like I said, to get, you know, your product, your service, your book, your expertise in front of 8 million people. So that's the first thing. I also think that for most people, you know, in my position, and most people in general, no matter what they're doing today, I think most people are busy and respect, you know, their time being respected. So I think making it short and sweet, you know, always works. I always appreciate, you know, titles in the subject matter that kind of grab my attention and tell me what I'm going to get before even opening the email. I don't really even get pitches via snail mail anymore. That's the other thing. I don't really open those anymore. So I think most pitches now are done via email. I even get pitches on social media, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit. But you know, make sure you put something in there. You know, for people that get 1,000 emails a day, it always helps to have a, you know, an attention-grabbing subject, you know, subject line, and then just make it short and sweet. Tell me why my listeners are going to benefit from you. What value are you going to bring? It's really never about your new song. It's never about your new book. It's never about your new movie. It's what value are the listeners going to get from that. So if you are a financial expert and you've written a book on the top 8 ways to save $1 million before retirement, tell me that. Tell me that you're going to, you know, you're going to help my listeners become millionaires. Obviously, that's, you know, an extreme amount of value, but make sure that you're giving me the value up front. And like I said, make it short and sweet. Make sure, you know, I know how to contact you. Going back to knowing who you're pitching, I mean, I think you should know a little bit about the show and be able to tailor your pitch to my audience. We don't really, you know, have a preference for African-American experts versus Asian experts or anything like that, but know that you're talking to a majority African-American audience, and make sure that your value, your pitch is going to speak to that, and how my particular audience is going to benefit. And know that we have a particular set of needs that need to be spoken to as opposed to maybe another race. So just know that. I don't think general pitches ever can translate from my audience to maybe a Howard Stern audience to, you know, a Phil Dawson audience. You need to know exactly what audience you're picking and be able to speak directly to that. And then make sure that you have, you know, the best contact information included in the pitch. Make sure that we can be able to, you know, we can reach you quickly. I always suggest that people, you know, have some realistic times and timelines in their head. Like I said, I mean, some obviously are time sensitive, you know, and I'm looking for, like I said, some experts for tomorrow's show to talk about Maya Angelou and the impact that she's had, you know, on, you know, the world. But there are some that are not, you know, like, you know, financial tips are usually pretty, you know, they're not really necessarily time sensitive. So I may be able to start looking for somebody for, you know, next month's show, you know, and just have people around. Be flexible and state that you're flexible. State that you know, if I need somebody and, you know, like a plane crashes, God forbid it, 11 o'clock at night, that you don't mind getting an 11:30 phone call if you happen to be an expert on plane crashes or you represent somebody who is, to book a client for the next morning show. That's the other thing. I think a lot of people have lost out on interviews because they're just not flexible with their time. And continue to stay in touch. I mean, just because I can't use you tomorrow doesn't mean that there's not something that will come up down the line that I may be able to use you for. So stay in touch and be flexible and be open. A no doesn't, now doesn't mean a no forever, I guess. So just to keep that in mind. And then also, I think it's really important to start including your client's social media connections and your social media reach. One thing that we are pretty insistent about when it comes to our interviews is that, the interviewee share and promote on their social media networks. And obviously, the larger the network, the better. So I know that we used to rely on pitches, but now if I need an expert, I'm going to Google you. And if you're not doing anything on social media, or you're not, maintaining some kind of social media presence, then it's pretty hard to find you. And I was, speaking with Jason yesterday, and I was telling him I talked to an Oprah producer from Oprah a couple of weeks ago, and they do the same thing. So this is pretty norm when it comes to a lot of television shows and radio shows. We Google people now. We don't even wait for a pitch. So also make sure that you or your client is active in social media and ready to promote when they do an interview, so that not only are you getting access to my platform, but then we are also getting access to the person being interviewed's platform. So those are some of my suggestions in a nutshell, I think, for making sure that you're pitching well when it comes to getting your guest or product on the air.
That's great, Nikki. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to post another poll while we continue to dialogue a little bit about this topic. And before I do that, just want to encourage, we see some questions are coming in, and we'll ask those in just a moment. Thank you for your patience. Please continue to submit questions to us via Twitter. So our next poll is, how did you hear about our webinar today? Nikki, I think it's really interesting how you're sharing that, SEO is playing a powerful role, search engine optimization, and how you're finding experts for your needs. And it's almost becoming, in some ways, perhaps, on-demand PR, meaning that, as you need an expert, you Google for them and you're reaching out to them, which is great. Our phone rings here at our public relations firm, where a media contact we have needs an expert on a certain topic, and we either accommodate them by helping them find somebody, or we expand out to our clients and our network to try to find that correct reach or that correct fit. But I also love how you mentioned that now you're looking for some social media audience reciprocation. How big is your social media network, and how are you going to promote and influence your appearance on our show? So that's certainly very interesting. Very interesting to hear you say that.
Yeah, it's going back to an earlier point we were making. I mean, it's a way for us to expand our network. We have people on that that have followers that may have never heard of the Tom Joyner Morning Show. So exposing us to them via your social media is really, really important to us. So it's not something that we take lightly. We definitely, expose you to our network, not only, on the air, but then we also post an article about you on the website, and then we do social media around it. So you're getting a lot of promotion, and we now are starting to expect the same in return.
I think that's brilliant. And looking at our poll here for today, we're seeing email was the predominant way people heard about our webinar, and much to my surprise,
Facebook, wow.
Twitter and LinkedIn are very low. So and then others. So that tells me that we probably need to allow people to submit questions other ways besides Twitter. So if that's something you would like to do, there should be a question box that you can complete as well, using your control panel in your GoToWebinar system. So Let's jump into some of those questions real quick that we have, and then we'll talk about the Oprah Winfrey Network next. But
Okay.
one of the questions that one of the first questions we received was someone saying, could you give me an example of an outstanding pitch that you've received, and kind of how that played out as far as how they contacted you, how it proceeded, and how long did it take from contact to being on the show?
Well, I can think of one in particular. It was a young lady who had written a book, and it was just a phenomenal. She was just very direct. She told me what her experience was. She ended up going to federal prison when she was in college. She ended up being pretty much a drug mule. And she ended up going to prison, and she had since then turned her life around, and she had become an inspirational speaker and a motivator. She was an author, and she was really about inspiring and motivating women. And so we were doing a topic, and we were talking about, pitfalls that girls get into when they go to college and why they don't finish college. And so she had sent me this pitch, and she had sent me, the part about her releasing a new book. And it probably took, it probably took maybe a month to get her on the air. But I think one of the reasons that I really thought about her is you could just feel her passion for this subject, and it was in an email. And then I followed up with the call when I was, when we started talking about doing this subject, and then you could just hear it. I could hear what she was going to bring to the audience. And I was excited about it. So I knew that our audience, was going to be excited about it. But she has almost become a regular now, a regular guest on the show, because not only does she continue to stay in touch with me, let me know if something happens, like, with the Nigerian girls being abducted. She reached out and was like, I'm here to, to talk about this in ways that we can prevent, not only girls over in Nigeria and around the world, but right here in the United States, how we can help keep our girls safe. But she follows up after every single time that she's on the air, just to thank me, one, but also to figure out, to let me know what kind of feedback she's getting, but to also get my feedback and how she can do a better job next time. And that, to me, is really impressive. I mean, it just shows me that she doesn't take the opportunity lightly, but that she's always top of mind, because every time something, and she doesn't do this for everything because she knows she's not an expert at everything, but every time a situation comes up that she can directly speak to, she reaches out and she gives me different angles. She lets me know different statistics and what she can bring to the table. So she is almost always top of mind when certain subjects come up. And we have different doctors that do the same thing when medical news, like they just released a study that diet soda is not as, that does help with weight loss. When before we heard, so there's a doctor that we work with a lot that sent an email this morning to kind of explain it and made himself available to come on the air and talk about it. And those are the kind of people that I remember. It's not just when I hear from you when you have a book or something that you want us to promote, that you really understand and get our audience, and you're ready to lend value when it's warranted. So I can't give you a formula for a pitch, but it's definitely not the generic pitch letter that I get 87% of the time. I think what I'm looking for is just that you, A, know our audience, B, that you have a passion for what you do and you're going to bring value to our audience, and that you make yourself available and that you follow up and that you stay top of mind. That it's not just pitching a product or a service because you want the promotion for your product or your service, but you really want to, in return, give some value to our audience.
Okay, terrific. I've got another question for you, but I'm going to poll the audience while I'm asking it.
Okay.
So my question for you would be, I guess you told me yesterday that when people follow up with you, you actually like it when that happens. You actually like it when someone follows up with you, and what we talked about, I call a balanced ambition type approach. And
right.
And I'm just wondering, describe that to our audience. How do you want to be followed up with? And I hear journalists complain all the time, and producers complain, editors complain. Yes, I don't need you to call me and ask me if I got your news release. So what do you recommend, and why and how do you like it when people follow up with you?
Well, I do recommend it, and I get when, because, there's a difference between stalker and, like you said, balancing ambition. So I definitely appreciate people, being passionate about what they do and wanting us to be a part of that passion. I think it's an honor for people to consider us when they're looking to launch their baby, if you will, or promote their product, or, share services. But like I said, the bottom line for me, and I'll give you an example in just a second, but the bottom line for me is that you're going to provide value to our audience. So knowing that and always offering to provide that value, and then, okay, your new book, is a byproduct, because we recognize that, some of the celebrities that we get because they're trying to sell something. But that to us, even to us, is the final consideration of an interview. It's what are you going to, and some people just offer value because of their name. I mean, we're not going to say no to Denzel. We're not going to say no to Oprah. I mean, there's some people who have just reached a certain type of celebrity, and that in itself provides value. But for the rest of us who haven't quite gotten there yet, we have to work a little bit harder to show what that value is going to be. And I appreciate those people who show that value and who follow up with some purpose. So like I said, I mentioned, the women's empowerment motivational speaker. I mean, she follows up when she knows she has some value to lend. The doctor that followed up with me this morning, I appreciate hearing from him when he gives me angles like, this is how you can explain this to your audience. If you need me to come on and do it, I'm available. So they're not just saying, okay, hey, don't forget I sent you my new book. Can I do an interview about my new book? And they do that on a weekly basis. They're actually following up with some purpose, and that is to provide value to our audience. I don't ever get tired of that because it makes my job a little bit easier. I mean, we produce a show 5 times a week. So finding new content, finding new information, finding new experts can get challenging. So anytime you help make my job a little bit easier, I'm going to appreciate you. And like I said, it's not a nuisance kind of thing. It's not an everyday, did you get my email kind of thing. It's just following up and saying, okay, this is what I can talk about. This is why your audience is going to benefit. And by the way, I may have a book to promote. By the way, I may have a new song out. And that's really secondary to the purpose of the email.
I love the idea that you just shared about how to explain something to your audience, and that obviously establishes the expertise and the subject matter that the person wants to speak on, but it also gives you a formula of okay, this person can come on and talk about this, and I think it would be interesting to my listeners. So that's very good. We've got a good question that came in I want to ask you as well, but in the interim I want to encourage our audience to continue to send us their questions. And while I ask that question, I'm going to launch another poll so everybody can participate and share their opinions. So, Nikki, the question that I received, and one I'm interested in hearing an answer from, this one is asking, is your show open to receiving product samples to accompany pitches? And if so, what's the best way to do that?
Most of the time I like to be asked if it's okay. I mean, we'll get the pitches, especially when it comes to books. We'll get the pitch about a new book, and a lot of times we do like to review the book first, if we're strongly considering doing an interview. So then we'll request it. Most of the samples, and I think that it's important for people to know, most of the time samples, when they're sent, they don't make it to Tom, Sybil, or Jay, or anybody that's on the air that I guess they think will talk about it because they received it. Normally it'll go to the producers, it'll go to the sales team, and then we'll make a decision whether or not it's something that we want to even present to Tom. Tom is very hands-on when it comes to interviews and things that he talks about, as most on-air personalities that I know. But we have to do a lot of filtering. So while we appreciate, a lot of the samples that are sent our way, usually I like to request it. I don't like it to just be sent. So usually in the email, people will say, would you like me to send a book, or can I send you samples? I would like to respond to that as opposed to samples just being sent.
I can understand, relate to that. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I want to say it's not just because, I don't, want them or whatever, but I also respect that a lot of hard work and a lot of people are, they're self-published or they're trying to do this themselves, and I just respect that all of that, costs a little bit of money. So if we're not interested, or I know that this is not something that we want to talk about, or it's just not something that fits our audience, then I would rather you send that to somebody that it can, benefit you and it can be helpful. So I just don't like to waste people's time or their money or their hard work or their energy. So it's not necessarily because I don't want to be bothered, but it's more so that I don't want to cost anybody anything if I know that there's no way that it's going to happen.
Right, absolutely. Okay, and let's see. We have more questions, and but first, I'm going to save those for the end. So stand by with us here. But we did promise we would talk a little bit about the Oprah Winfrey Network and your status as an ambassador there. So give us a little bit of insight into that, please.
Well, when Oprah Winfrey launched her network, I think that, we were just on the cusp of social media, and it was really starting to get big. So one of the things that Oprah Winfrey decided to do with Oprah Winfrey Network is she decided to kind of develop a program of ambassadors that, were in the business, but definitely had a handle on who she was trying to reach, so that she could get feedback on different programs, different documentaries, different television series, but also be able to spread the word either via social media, or if they were a producer at a show or a network, they would be able to do some kind of promotional talk about it on the air. So they initially started a program. It has since expanded greatly to involve a lot of different people, because it worked so well in spreading the word for the network that she just continued to open it up. So she indeed has a ton of brand ambassadors, not only, in the media, which I think most of us are kind of the founding ambassadors, but also in social media. So most people, if they're passionate about a show for social media, they are able to reach out and let, folks at the Oprah Winfrey Network know that, and then they can become own ambassadors, and, they might get some information about what, shows that they're passionate about. We still, I think the founding ambassadors have more of a say in programming. We still probably get the sneak peeks of television shows so that we can brief our talent about it and brief our fan base about it as well, and our social media connections about it as well. So it's just really a fun way, I think, to get people involved. I think it's been a really good grassroots effort for her in spreading the word about the network and the programming that they've decided to place on there. So it's a lot of fun.
Well, that's very cool that you were selected to be one of the founding ambassadors, and I think it's brilliant that they've opened that up to their fans as well. Now that the network is well established. In fact, we'll be talking about upcoming webinars in just a moment here, and we are in the process of trying to book somebody from the Oprah Winfrey Network, and I think that'll be very interesting to the folks that are on the call today.
Oh yeah, that would be awesome.
All right. Well, we have more questions that have come in, and a couple of comments that have come in, just saying people are really enjoying the webinar and really gleaming a lot of good information from it. So, Nikki, we appreciate your contributions. I would ask anybody, if you haven't sent in your questions yet, please do so. You may also use the question box in your GoToMeeting control panel, which might be more convenient for you if you're not on Twitter. But let's see. Going back to the questions we have, tell us just, you have any, I'm going to pop up another poll here while you answer the question. But my question to you is, have you ever had a really bad pitch that's just really gone bad? And what could we as public relations professionals, marketers, entrepreneurs, business owners, and executives learn from, pitches that have gone bad or the wrong way to approach the media?
I can't think of any pitches. The response I would have initially is it's a bad pitch if it didn't make it on the air, or at least get a response. there are a lot of pitches that I just don't respond to because they did one of the things that I mentioned earlier that just really irritate me. Either they're, very general and just don't speak to our audience. They have, they're pitching the wrong person, meaning a producer from 20 years ago that's no longer there. Those sort of things. A lot of those, or it's just, some of the subjects I will get, in the subject line, and, instead of telling me what value I'm going to get from opening this email, it'll say book interview now. Those kind of things I don't really even, bother to open. I mean, like I said, we get a lot of pitches every single day. It's very rare that we'll accept a pitch and then, something just go really, really wrong with it on the air, because we tend to, vet our people pretty well. The one thing that I would offer to those who are pitching clients is that you make sure that your client is air ready. So there are a lot of experts out there that are really, really good in their field of expertise, but they don't necessarily present a good radio interview. So if you're pitching for radio or you're pitching for television, that you just make sure your client is ready for whatever show or medium that you're pitching for. A lot of the feedback that I get, and I just attribute this back to whoever their media handler is that they didn't know that Tom was like a music formatted show, or they didn't know that we were going to have fun with the interview, and so they didn't get all their points across. But to me, that just means you weren't prepared correctly for the interview. So I guess my best advice, and then once the interview goes bad, we're more likely than not going to have you back on the air again. And this goes for anybody. This goes for celebrities. This goes for experts. This goes for anybody. So my advice would just be that once the pitch is accepted and once the interview is booked, that you just make sure that your client is radio ready or TV ready and really ready to present a good interview, so that they will be asked back again.
That's really good advice. I advise clients that almost every interview is different, and you have to really not only know who you're speaking with at the outlet, but also understand who is their audience and who are they trying to please, and how do they typically handle other interviews, so there's no surprises. I just want
Absolutely.
Yeah, real quick, I want to remind our attendees to vote on our quick poll here. We're about to close it, and then also we want to remind our attendees that they've got just a little bit more time to ask questions with Nikki Woods, executive or senior producer of the Tom Joyner Morning Show, and feel free to ask questions about their audience, or maybe even a scenario of if they would be interested in a certain topic. This is really your opportunity to meet the producer and connect with her.
One other thing before you ask the next question that I think I mentioned to you yesterday but forgot to mention earlier. The other thing I appreciate, if I do say, we'll pass on this interview at this time, or this is just not right for our audience, I never mind getting an email back saying, okay, well, do you have an idea of a show this might work for, or why did you pass on this interview? I have found that a lot of people who pitch quite regularly won't even follow up and say, why did you pass, or why is this not right, or what could I have done to make it better, or why didn't this pique your interest? I mean, I never mind getting feedback, and I think that it only makes them, whoever it is, the agency or the PR person, know how to pitch me better, but I think it makes their pitches better overall, because I think it gives them things to look for in other pitches. So I always will, if I see a good pitch that I know may work for one of my friends at a different show, but I know doesn't really work for us, I don't mind referring, and I don't mind giving feedback. So I think that if somebody passes on your interview, not everybody will do this, but I think if somebody passes, it behooves you to ask, well, why? What could I have done differently, or what didn't catch your interest, or why is your audience just not interested in this? So
right.
That's just a thought.
Nikki, that's really generous of you to do that, and I know so many other media contacts won't do that, and then it doesn't help that person auto-correct, or kind of change course, or think twice about how they're approaching you. And so in my opinion, what that leads to is just more bad pitches or annoying follow-ups from that person. So very, very helpful.
Right.
I hope everybody captured
Oh,
that recommendation. I do have another question that's come in here. What do you think of internet radio and its place in broadcast media?
well, I will put my radio hat on for this answer. You know what? I think at first, we're always, traditional radio is always threatened when something happens. So like when internet radio happens, or when, satellite radio started really being big, and all of that stuff. I mean, I think that when you're in a profession, we tend to be snobs about, other things that come up that may threaten that. And I think that's just a little bit of insecurity. But in the same vein, I will tell people who are now in college, or who are just getting out of college, who are deciding that radio is something that they really want to do. I mean, this is a golden opportunity to just do something. When I first started radio, we didn't have any other outlets. So it's like, if I didn't get hired at a radio station, then I didn't work. So I couldn't just go out there and have my own radio show, or just go out there and work on my craft. It'd be better if traditional radio is the way that I did decide to go. So I really am appreciative of it. I mean, some people have really, started not only, gaining their own notoriety, but they're making careers now out of internet radio. So it's really, really cool to see. And like I said, I mean, it's a great opportunity for people just now coming out of school, or deciding to change careers and do something different, or just people who are passionate about communicating with other people, to start their own radio show and talk about what they love. It's something that I would recommend, to authors, to experts. I mean, I think that it's just another way to brand yourself as an authority on something. Just like some people blog, I think internet radio is another avenue if you're not, into writing as much, but you love to talk. So I think it's really cool, and I think that we in traditional radio, quote unquote, have kind of gotten used that there are going to be different ways to do what we love, and that we've become more accepting of that. Obviously we still have to fight for every listener. I think that's what we should be doing. I think it makes us better. But I think that internet radio is a really cool option for those who love radio and have something that they want to talk about.
All right, terrific. I'm going to move to the next slide, but we're still going to accept questions, and I've got a few more coming in. But I also want to encourage everybody to tweet to us what you've learned so far in this webinar as we're beginning to wrap up, and I think that'll be interesting for us to see as well. I want to just mention briefly that we have future webinars coming up, and you can connect with us about those webinars at axiapr.com/webinars. Tell your friends and colleagues. Right now, we're working to schedule a couple of guests for June and July, but for now, we have August 6th confirmed with Nancy Weingartner, the executive editor of Franchise Times, for our Meet the Editor series webinar. The question that has come in is, do you pre-record any segments of the show? And if you do, why and how does that work?
We do not. We do not typically pre-record. Tom is adamant, and I can only, and I've really never had a discussion with him about this. He's just always said no. But I think because Tom is such a in the moment kind of guy, that he just loves for it to be within the content of the current show. So the only time that we have pre-recorded, it has been somebody really, really big, like the President of the United States, the First Lady we've pre-recorded. I think we've pre-recorded Vice President Biden when he was on our show. I think maybe we pre-recorded Denzel once. Outside of that, we haven't, and we won't. Sometimes our segments we will pre-record if it's an interview. Like I said, a lot of our commentators and the people who conduct our segments are pretty big power players, like Reverend Al Sharpton, Roland Martin, Don Lemon, and they have a busy travel schedule, so we may pre-record them, but even that doesn't happen a lot. Tom says we're on the air from 5 to 9, 6 to 10 Eastern. If you can't fit within that, then, we'll have to take a pass.
Right.
So it's very rare that we pre-record.
Okay.
And I will say, though, that really is not typical. Most shows are okay with pre-recording.
Mm-hmm.
You know, especially morning shows, because we realize, I think that we have to deal, you know, we don't have to deal, but we have people on the West Coast. You know, a lot of celebrities live in L.A. and on the West Coast, and so to do a 6:50 interview, that's 4:50 their time. So I think a lot of other shows do kind of allow for that. But for us, you know, and I think it's because we are so big that, you know, we can say, you know, we need you to show up.
I'm a little surprised that we haven't heard from anybody saying, "I've got this client. How do I best pay for it?" You know, we almost always get those kind of questions, and you
Okay.
know, and of course, you know, when you started talking about, you know, having a medical expert, you know, I could see that the attentiveness of our audience was increasing. So, you know, if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask, as we've got about 5 more minutes here, I'd be happy to pose your question to our special guest, Nikki Woods, about that. But Nikki, I'd like to just quickly recap some of the highlights, and you know, correct me if I overlook anything. But you know, some of the insights you've shared that I think are great, and some of these may have come from our private conversations. But you know, you mentioned that you know, that you don't really like to get snail mailed pitches, and you know, and I kind of joke around with other PR people. You know, no one else is snail mailing pitches, no one else is faxing, you know, pitches anymore. I wonder if you can stand out from the clutter, you know, by doing that. You know, I feel almost like you're sending a telegram or something. You know, the only faxes we get are junk faxes.
Yeah.
And it just seems like such a dated technology. But you know, if you're trying to stand out in somebody's email box, maybe you don't go to their email box. Maybe you try to circumvent it another way.
No, it's not going to work with me. It may work with other people, but it's not going to work with me. And I think one of the reasons, and this is, you know, but it's easier. Say you do send me something and I need to follow up with you, it's just easier. Or if you do send me something and I know it's better suited to go to a different department, it's easier just to forward than to have to walk, you know, sometimes down, you know, some stairs to hand it to somebody. It's just easier. I know one thing that we did talk about was whether or not I was open to being contacted on social media, and I didn't bring that up today, but I'm absolutely open to being contacted on social media, but I'm still going to tell you to email me. I may remember you because you tweeted me, but I'm going to still tell you to email me because it's just easier for me. And, you know, I can only speak to my preferences, but it's just easier for me to also organize email. So I organize my email based on medical pitches or based on financial experts or based on people who want to talk about relationships. Or if it's, you know, somebody that I better, and this is another thing. Sometimes we get experts from cities where I know the local affiliate would love to put them on the air. Maybe we won't, but then I can forward it to somebody in that city, and they can get the interview done that way. So there's just a variety of things I can do on email that I can't do with a paper fax or with a snail mail letter or even a tweet. So even if you tweet me, I'm going to still tell you to email me, but I don't mind you tweeting me at all.
Okay, we've got another question here. It says, let's see. Is it typical that somebody might ask you to get an interview booked during a certain time slot on your show? And, you know, how might you react to that?
It's 2:00.
Yeah, people do request, obviously, the later slots, but we offer what we have. And, you know, the later slots tend to book up a little bit faster. And if we know that we're going to try to book an interview with Denzel Washington and he's going to be on the West Coast, we would probably hold that for him. I mean, we are a morning show. We expect people to understand and realize that we do not pre-record an interview for the show at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Nobody is going to be there to do it. So, you know, like I said, there's some give and take. If I'm going to offer you 8 million pairs of ears, then I expect you to do a little something in return, and that's get up early for one. So you can request it, but we can't always accommodate.
Right, right. Well, Nikki, thank you for your time today. We have reached our time limit, and we're grateful for you helping our community and the business community in general better understand how to reach your listeners on the Tom Joyner Morning Show. And we look forward to staying in touch with you and sending you new and improved pitches that make your job easier and your audience receiving more value from tuning in.
No, I appreciate you, Jason. I think this was a phenomenal experience and opportunity, not only to talk about Tom, but just hopefully it'll make your job a little bit easier, and those the jobs of our listeners and those participating in the webinar just a little bit easier. So, like I said, everybody's time is really, really valuable, and I appreciate the hour that I got to spend with you and everybody on the webinar.
Well, good. We have, looks like we're going to sneak in one more question if you have a moment, and that would be,
sure.
What are your favorite type of guests to book?
I love booking anybody that is passionate about what they do. It's like we love good radio. And so we like people who are experts at what they do, whether you're an expert at making movies or starring in them, or you're an expert at helping people with their finances. But we like it when that expertise translates to our audience. So there are just some fun people always to work with. Bill Bellamy is one. He's a comedian, and he's one that I always love to talk about, because when Bill Bellamy comes, I can go home. He comes and he's ready to produce his own segment, and it's really, really fun for me. But that's because he's so passionate about what he does, which is providing humor to our audience. So I love people like that. I love people that are like, hey, I'm so passionate about making sure that women live a better life that I want to talk to your audience about that. And then when they show up for the interview, they have this energy that just makes our audience and the producers and Tom and on-air personalities fall in love with them. Those are the kind of guests that I like, and those are the ones that we ask back. Those are the ones that we want to have on the air over and over and over again, because they bring that passion for whatever it is that they do to our audience. We want you to talk about what you're good at, but we want you to be passionate about it too.
Terrific. Another question came in, and this is a good one. How far in advance do you book guests? I know a lot of times you're looking for the news of the evening and booking them for the next morning on the news of the day. But then I've got to imagine there's probably, movie openings and album releases and things like that where you can schedule some of that. So let us into your insight on that, please.
No, absolutely. I mean, I really don't know of anybody that we book maybe more than 2 months out. But you're right. I mean, there are certain movies coming out that we know, certain album releases, certain times of the year, like, remembering 9/11, remembering Hurricane Katrina, or Black Music Month, or Black History Month. There are just things that we know are going to happen. It could be, national, and I just got a pitch for this, so this is why it comes to mind, but National Child Abuse Awareness, Month. Those sort of things. Those things we look at and we can predict, what's going to happen and that we will need an expert. Breast Cancer Awareness Month. Those sorts of things. We're always looking for experts to talk about that sort of stuff. I would say 2 months out is probably the most amount of time that we'll book, and that's just because we're also booking day to day. But there are things, like you said, that we can predict and that we know we're going to talk about.
Okay, terrific. Very, 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 very helpful. I learned several new things today, Nikki. Again, we appreciate it. And from all of us at Axia and all the attendees on the webinar today, thank you again for sharing your insights. And we wish everybody a great day.
Thank you. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, Nikki.